Okay, this is the recording for the part A of the heart. So here we see pictures of the surface of the heart highlighting the blood vessels. And this is a photograph of a valve in the heart. It's closed. So in the heart chapter, cardiovascular system or circulatory system, the organs in the system include the heart, the arteries, and the veins. There are also important tissues, which would be the blood and the capillaries. So capillaries are blood vessels, but they're only made out of one tissue. Functions for the cardiovascular system, yes, these are going to seem similar to the functions of blood. Transportation of blood and its contents, so nutrients, waste products, respiratory gases, and heat. It's a distribution center, it's a pickup, it's a site to acquire these things. The immune response, which we've talked about in the lymphatic system. Fluid, electrolyte, and pH balance. Again, it's a location, it's a transportation, so it's a source, and it's a place to get rid of them. Maintaining blood pressure. There's a certain volume of pressure associated with various things, in addition to maintaining fluid volume in the body. Hemostasis, and we've talked about this in the blood chapter. Okay, so the circuits. You have a diagram in chapter 19, and this is the top part of it to cover this pulmonary circuit. The pulmonary circuit carries blood from the the right ventricle to the lungs for gas and other substance exchanges, and back to the left atrium. All of these vessels have the word pulmonary in their name. So you have the pulmonary trunk, pulmonary arteries, which branch out and become pulmonary capillaries. The pulmonary capillaries converge into the pulmonary veins, which empty back directly into the left atrium. So if it doesn't have the word pulmonary in it, it's not part of this system. So we have a closed circulatory system, and we have two circulating pathways here within the cardiovascular system. The main job for the pulmonary circuit is exchanging respiratory gases. We tend to acquire oxygen and get rid of carbon dioxide. The systemic circuit carries blood from the left ventricle to the cells of the body and back to the right atrium, again for exchanging materials between what's in the blood and what's in the cells. These are all of the other blood vessels. Now, you have the use of red and blue. All of your blood is going to be red. Sometimes it's darker, sometimes it's lighter. Now, something you keep in mind. When you look at the drawings, when you see red, that indicates the blood is high in oxygen and low in carbon dioxide. Oops. Oh well. CO2. Okay, let's start over again. Oops. Red, the blood is high in oxygen and low in carbon dioxide. This is carried by pulmonary veins and systemic arteries. When you see the blue, that indicates the blood is low in oxygen and high in carbon dioxide. That's carried by the pulmonary arteries and systemic veins. So the coloring and the type of blood carried in the two circuits is going to be the opposite in their tubes. The only generic statement you can make about all arteries is they carry blood away from the heart, and all veins carry blood towards the heart. There are some specific subdivisions within the systemic circuit that we will take a look at in other parts of this chapter and in the blood vessel chapter, as well as your pulmonary or your blood pathways assignment. Position of the heart. You have a cadaver picture, you have two diagrams. Okay, the heart is located medial to the lungs, which is this picture down here. It extends from about the third pair of ribs to about the fifth or sixth pair of ribs 2/3 of its mass is left of the midline. Oops. So yes, when you place your right hand over your heart, you go across because most of it's over there. It's superior to the diaphragm, which sits here. Right on the other side of the diaphragm is the stomach, and that's why we have the term heartburn. So you can see the lungs, you can see the heart, you can see the diaphragm, you can also see the large veins versus the large arteries. The apex is the inferior pointed end of the heart, closest to the stomach. It tells you where the left ventricle is. Apex tells you where the left ventricle. So whether you're looking at the front of it, the back of it, the side of it, the inside, the outside, you should be able to tell the left side from the right side. The base is the wide superior end where all of the major blood vessels are attached. So base means wide end, not bottom or top. Yes, when you look at a mountain, the apex is the top, but it's the pointed narrow end, and the base is the wide end at the bottom. But in the heart, it's the other way around. Apex is inferior and base is superior. The picture up here shows the placement of the sternum. And so when you're doing chest compressions, you're basically trying to squish the heart between the sternum and the vertebral column behind it. And that's why you have to find the xiphoid process, because you don't want to poke a hole or in the heart or in a lung. Okay. The pericardium. This is a concept that you're going to see here and other places. It has the same components in the other places. We just change out pericardium for the root word. So with the pericardium, you have a thick membranous sac that surrounds the heart, isolating it from the rest of the thoracic cavity. It has 3 components that we see here, and you can see part of it where I put my arrow. The functions of the pericardium. 1, it anchors the heart in the thoracic cavity. So it's not flopping around, it stays place. Now, it's not a rigid anchoring because the heart does contract and relax. Okay. 2, the pericardium is a physical barrier. So it keeps things out and it prevents over distension. So as the heart contracts and relaxes, it gets narrower, smaller, and then it gets bigger as it fills up. So we don't want it to overfill. So this is going to limit the amount of space associated with the heart. It's going to keep things like bacteria and other organs from coming in contact with the heart so it can do its job. The third function is that it secretes a serous fluid to reduce friction. The serous fluid means it's a thin, runny fluid, kind of like inside a blister, as opposed to mucus, which is the thick, sticky fluid that you have in your nose and your mouth. Friction is what happens when two surfaces rub up against each other. If you rub your hands up against each other for an extended period of time, you're going to generate heat and damage the tissues. You're going to lose cells. So that's what the pericardial fluid, the serous fluid, is going to reduce. Pericarditis is when this layer gets infected. Sometimes there's an overproduction of fluid, and that can be a problem. And sometimes there is a reduction of fluid production. And so there would not be that serous fluid-filled space. Okay, the components. You have the parietal pericardium, which is the superficial thick layer of dense tissue that mostly acts as a physical barrier and anchors the heart in place. So here, this white tissue, and yes, it's part of this, so it anchors it to the diaphragm and is a thick layer. There's a thin serous membrane towards the inside, which we can see here in this pink layer here. The visceral pericardium is the superficial layer of the heart. It's a thick serous membrane on the outer cover of the heart. So, visceral pericardium, its job is mainly to make the serous fluid. In between those two layers, you have the pericardial space. That's the serous fluid-filled space. In between the two layers. Oops. So it's in here. Oops, here we go. The size of the pericardium can vary. If it gets filled up with fluid, then it can become a problem. It can limit the size of the heart expanding and can create a cardiac tamponade. A lot of times when there's trauma, it fills up that space. And so it limits the amount of space and it reduces how much blood the heart can propel. So we would have to go in and reduce that fluid volume, pull it out. So you have three components to the pericardium, three functions. All right. Again, you're going to see this concept again. There's a cover that surrounds the lungs, and there's a cover that surrounds the abdominal organs. It's going to have the same three functions and the same three components. Again, we'll just take out pericardium and put in the other term. The heart wall has three layers. The epicardium is the superficial surface, which is a serous membrane. Yes, it's the same layer that we just identified as the visceral pericardium. The relationship is different. The layer of tissue is the same. So it can have two names, just like as an individual, you can be a parent and a child at the same time, but you're still the same person. So epicardium and visceral pericardium depends on the relationship that you're talking about. Epicardium, think epidermis. So the superficial layer of tissue. The middle layer is called the myocardium. It's this thick layer of cardiac muscle tissue. Middle layer, MYO for muscle, but the M is also for middle. Endocardium is the inner lining of the heart chambers. It covers all of the surfaces inside the chamber. It covers the valves. It covers the papillary muscles, etc. It's also continuous with the endothelium of blood vessels. So there's no seam between the heart and the blood vessel, which would be a place for hemostasis. So same kind of tissue, endothelium in the blood vessel, endocardium in the heart. So it's still simple squamous epithelium, but again, it covers all of the surfaces internally, and you can kind of see it in this little light colored layer here. So 3 layers of tissue make up the heart wall. The heart in humans has 4 chambers. So do birds, so do alligators and crocodiles. The rest of the reptiles, so the lizards, turtles, and snakes, all have 3 chambers. The amphibians, frogs, salamanders, newts, toads, they're all going to have 3 chambers to their heart. And then fish only have 2. Okay, so we have a 4-chambered heart. And that's so we can separate the pulmonary circuit from the systemic circuit. So 2 kinds of valves. Atrioventricular valves prevent blood from going back into an atrium. They're composed of flaps, which we also call cusps, tendinous cords, which are also called chordae tendineae, and papillary muscles. So you have a superior view here in this picture. This would be on the right side, and this would be on the left side. So on the right side, you have the tricuspid valve because it has 3 cusps. On the left side, you have the mitral or bicuspid valve. Now, oops, there we go. So tricuspid, because this is the apex, so this would be the left side and that would be the bicuspid. So the bicuspid valve and tricuspid valves keep the blood from going back to the atrium. They're going to open when the pressure is high. They're going to close when the pressure is low. One, 2, 3 cusps or tricuspid. 1, 2, 4 bicuspid. The mitral valve is also associated with mitral valve prolapse, It means that the valve does not close all the way. So that means it can't keep all of the blood from going backwards. Sometimes it doesn't open all the way because calcifications can occur on the valves, and that would make them less flexible, and so it wouldn't let all the blood it should pass into the ventricle. Okay, the different components of the atrioventricular valves include the cusps, which are flat membranes of dense tissue covered with the endocardium. The tendinous cords, or chordae tendineae, are narrow extensions of those cusps. If we get the other picture, you can see them here and here. So they're also dense tissue with endocardium. Then the papillary muscles are extensions of the myocardium that are anchored to the tendinous cords. They keep the valve from involuting. So it's supposed to close in that kind of a shape. They don't want it to close and go into the atrium. So it's like we don't want it to flip inside. So the valves are supposed to close, and that's that lubbed up, lubbed up, lubbed up. It's the closing of the valve. It's not supposed to flip inside. So it should close, but not involute or go inside the valve or inside the atrium. So it shouldn't come back this way. It should stay here. Some things they can do if the valves are messed up. I mentioned calcifications can develop on the valves or cusps. They can go in and scrape those calcifications off so that they can start working better. They can replace the valves either with metal valves. They can replace them with pig heart valves, and they can replace them with cadaver valves. Now, cadaver valves are going to be harder to come by. That's why they checked into and looked at pig heart valves. The cool thing about a pig heart valve replacement is that you don't have to do anti-rejection medication. For some reason, there are no protein markers on the valves of the pig hearts or on ours. One other thing that can happen, which is what happened with my mom, they scraped off the calcifications and then they put a ring in so that the opening didn't collapse. The ring is made out of plastic, but it still shows up on her x-rays, which I thought was something new. And that happened, it's been about 10 years ago. So lots of things they can do. Most of the time you hear about the mitral valve being the one that's messed up, but any of the valves can get messed up. Or altered. A murmur is what you hear when the heart valve is not working properly. So atrioventricular valves keep the blood from going back into an atrium. It's supposed to go into the ventricle and stay there. Again, it works by pressure. The pressure in the atrium rises, and that's going to push the valve open, pushing blood through it. When the pressure drops, then the valve closes. Blood's not moving through it anymore. All right, so that's the end of part A for the cardiovascular system.